player salaries. Do you think that they're inflated right now? Do you think we're going to see an adjustment period happen with those?
The esports industry has 100% overpaid players, in my opinion, and now we are seeing the side effects of inflation. Esports isn't going anywhere regardless. We just need to all be ready to have lighter wallets as we move through the space.
Welcome into another Bot Lobby podcast episode. We are back. It's been a long time, but we're excited to be back for our first inaugural episode of 2023, a brand new year. I'm Gojj. I've been your host all of last year, and of course, my co-host Katie Bedford is back as well. Katie, I know I'm excited to be here, but your excitement has to be at least the same as mine, if not more, because we've been talking a ton off screen, and we're just both pumped to be back.
Yes, I'm so excited. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope the start of your 2023 has been going well. And I've been itching for it. Obviously, we had a lot of reasons why during the holiday season we took a bit of a break, but it feels good to get back into things. And with an incredible star joining us on the show, I think I couldn't have asked for a better guest to start off the year.
Yeah, no, and there's a lot to talk about. And I want to basically just jump straight into it. Our guest today is somebody that I've known for a very long time, basically since I've been in the industry almost. We both had a lot of kind of a come up in our own ways that is very different than the traditional guests that we've had on, right? Where we have a lot of these pro players, if you can call them that, or content creators come on. This is a different side of the story, which I'm really excited to tell, because this side of the story is the more behind the scenes. Some on camera, but mostly off camera. We've got a good friend of mine coming in that is an org owner, the org with the most amount of Warzone content creators and competitors signed out of, I believe, any org in the world. Somebody can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty positive that is correct in terms of raw numbers. Really excited to tell this story, and specifically the story of why. So without further ado, let's bring in my good friend Rafi, who is the CEO, the creator, the brain behind, and kind of the troll behind OMiT in the amazing org that a lot of us know and love, especially those in the Warzone scene. Rafi, how are we doing today, my man?
Good, man. Thank you for calling me a troll, because that's actually how I want to be defined as in all of 2023. I should actually change my title to troll from OMiT GG. That'd be perfect.
Yes.
I will say, Rafi, I was, I put out a tweet about you coming on the show, and I was looking for a picture of you. And the amount of media posts I had to scroll through that were GIFs or memes that you had posted on the timeline trolling people was like almost a year's worth until I found a picture of you. So you're doing your job well if you're going to go for the troll.
Oh, I love that. I'm definitely active with the GIFs, and just if you actually have to go through my timeline, I apologize, because there's a lot of garbage in between actual great content.
Premium garbage, though.
I scrolled quickly. We made it there. We made it happen. No, super excited to have you. I want to jump in and really talk about the whole story behind everything that you've built and your team's built. Before we go there, we always do this with our guests. We have rapid fire questions. Now, usually these rapid fire questions are like, hey, what's your favorite competitive moment of all time? Rafi, I'm gonna be honest, man. You and I are about the same. We're decent at the game. We're not necessarily good, right? So you and I aren't competing, but you have a long history of owning or talking with or helping people through the competitive scene, so you know a lot about it. So we're gonna hit some rapid fire questions in that realm, and first answer that comes to mind is what I want you to throw out there. These are supposed to be pretty quick, 1 to 2 word answer, and then we'll get into the meat of the podcast. Sound good?
Let's do it.
All right, sweet. I'll start, and then Katie and I will kind of bounce back and forth. First and foremost, and this one's not really fair, but it is what it is. Who is your favorite competitor to watch right now?
Hate Adrian.
Heck yeah. I like that.
The kid's unbelievable. Like he's competing with Sucker right now as the best player on this map.
I love that take. We're going to get into more about that, and I am in that same realm for sure. Katie?
No, I agree. There's a lot of upcoming talent we've already seen start to shine in Al Mazrah, so I'm very excited to see where that leads. But who was the first person that you signed to OMiT?
First person that I signed to OMiT. See, that's I can't answer that in 2 questions or in 2 words.
Give me the phrase. Give me the short sentence then.
It started off with #Rafi.
Correct.
Back in Verdansk. So if we're talking about starting off with signing Team Rafi, it's Z Smith and Ribs as the 1 and 2 first signings.
Z Smith, wow.
Yeah, Z Smith was the one. Back when he was Z Smitty with the mullet and the backwards hat. He was the very first one. And he actually, I got to give him credit. Like, he's the one that kind of inspired me to take the dive. So shout out Smith.
Great answer. I love it. Favorite streaming / competitive moment from any person on your team that you were able to witness?
They weren't on my team is the answer. So watching Unveiled and Sage and Goat Clamp win that 100K Rebirth tournament.
Yep.
With how stacked and all the drama that happened leading up to that tournament. You know, I think that was probably my favorite one so far, just because of how many eyeballs were on them and just them kind of cementing, hey, we're here and we're not going to fuck around about being here anymore.
Yep.
So
great comps. I love that.
All right. Favorite meta of all time?
Grau and P5.
Nice. That's a classic. I think that's probably up there in my top 2. We get answers all across the board, but that's probably our favorite. Favorite Warzone competitive format. And I will say you can give an answer for what currently doesn't really count because there's really only 1 or 2, but favorite of all time throughout kind of all of the different maps that we've seen. What's your favorite comp format?
It has to be customs.
Okay.
Bar none, customs is the best versus the best, right? So, you know, bot lobby kill races are one thing, and we see them so much. It might be a recency answer. Yeah. But I think customs really brings out the best of people across the board. So definitely that format.
No, I'd have to agree. It gives you a true sense of their skill set because they are playing against directly others of that same level of skill. All right, last question. If you could do any dream brand deal right now for OMiT, what would it be or who would it be with?
Oh, Herman Miller.
Ooh, I like that.
And the reason I say that is because, you know, everyone spends a good amount of money on their setup. Me getting an air on Herman Miller is still by far the best investment from a comfortability standpoint. So I believe in the product, and I think that they stand for luxury. So I'm a little bit of a bougie bitch when it comes to shit like that. And, you know, a $2,000 chair is not recommended for a lot of people, but it's worth every single penny.
Yeah, I think I see a Sage in the chat saying, please, my back hurt. So I feel that. I love that. Well, Rafi, I appreciate you kind of entertaining us there and breaking the ice to start. We wanted to start where you wanted to start, and some of the things we were talking about before the podcast started. We got to start talking about the beginning, right? Because you and I, obviously you, but I know the story pretty well, but not fully, of the very, very beginning of Team Rafi, #Rafi, the clan tag Rafi, and you know, the Rafi Rumbles back in the day, the $500 tourneys. You know, like there's the OG brand, but I don't think everybody, or even really a lot of people, know the full story, and also like the mission behind then OMiT coming into the light as an official org and the signings that you guys have had. So would love to talk through that with you, but start back at the very beginning with you getting into the gaming scene and what kind of led to you working through this kind of Team Rafi craziness that happened.
100%. So I think it's almost cliche to say it now, but I arrived to the gaming scene late. You know, I was that college kid playing on a 65-inch TV on a console and thinking that you were good dropping into any sort of map before. But I arrived late because I was forced to, you know, I was laid off during COVID, and with COVID, you were spending a forced amount of time indoors, right? So how was I going to make money? You know, I was living in New York City, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to turn on this camera and start playing video games. You know, I started watching Twitch, started off with Swag and Destroy, and my motto was always, okay, how is it that I can put black and brown talent on the map? Or how is it that I can help them in any way, shape, or form? So before the Baka Bros were Baka Bros, we're talking about Biffle, Repulse, Lucky Shamu, Destroy, Swag. Those were the kind of content creators that I was watching. And of course, Swag and Destroy already had their established base, but I was supporting Baka Bros in different ways, and look at their come up and their blow up, right? So that's awesome, and kudos to them. They've done an amazing job. I think it's funny, Swag ended up being the one that put them on, and now Hector's doing the same for Sage. So it's just a poetic type of waterfall, if you will, that I've kind of Yeah, they're just paying it forward. If you're a good person, you do that. Swag has done it for a lot of content creators, and now Hector's doing the same. So I'm hoping that, like Katie, how you and I were talking about, like how humble Sage is. That's how he's been every single moment that I've ever spoken to him. He's a shithead and he's a troll like me, which is why we get along. But hopefully he doesn't get jaded and he pays it forward the way that Hector has for him. So long-winded answer. That's why I started OMiT. You know, like the word OMiT quite literally means to be left out deliberately or accidentally, to be forgotten about, right? And Smitty, Base God Xenon, Ribs, Crinks, Gooey were the first 5 signings, I think, for #Rafi.
Yeah.
We're all being left out. You didn't see those kids competing in tournaments. Nobody wanted to pick them up because, you know, everyone thought Smitty was cheating when he first came onto the scene. He was so damn good.
Yeah,
right?
7+ KD ripping,
That's how it goes.
stupid numbers.
That was insane. And, you know, Sage, like he's original #Rafi. There's still 2 or 3 original #Rafis now on OMiT, but it was about helping them navigate, like even just small things like, hey, your stream, your camera, your angle, your lighting. What does your stream look like as far as aesthetics? Do you have sub badges? Do you have emotes? No. How can we get those for you? And just kind of like that progression and that blossoming journey that streamers go through to make themselves look, you know, even if they're faking it till they make it, how is it that we can make that easier for you? Born is OMiT, and kind of the rest has been on a fast track of growth.
Yeah, and I think for a bit of context, because I know a bit of your background, like what were you doing before gaming? Like, I guess the question really is like, you know, somebody like you and I and other people that kind of came up through COVID that were not what I would call esports or gaming kind of endemic people. COVID brought in like a whole new wave of different types of people into the sphere that have changed the sphere for the better. And I think you're in that category. There's no question. So what were you doing before the gaming thing? Like what type of work were you doing that kind of allowed you to be able to not only like help other people, but also inform them of maybe things that they didn't know? Because there's a lot of people in the gaming scene, especially endemic people, that obviously don't understand business, which is things that you obviously have kind of a long history in.
Yeah, I love that question, and you're probably the best person to be asking me these questions just because you have that background. You know, I was brand director North America for Ciroc Vodka for a couple of years. Worked directly with P Diddy or Puff Daddy or Brother Love, however he wants to be called this year. So that was cool. Managing upwards of budgets of $25 million worth of marketing for him, flying between New York and LA. Twice a week type shit. That jumped me over to Hypebeast. I don't know if people are familiar with Hypebeast, but it's basically like the BuzzFeed of streetwear culture, and beyond, sneakers and basically everything regarding that. I was brand director North America for that, and then also went over to basically Annex 88, which was the social AOR for Adidas. So I worked on the launching of the Adidas TikTok social platform, as well as just events with Beyonce, and all of, ASAP Rocky throwing parties for Adidas sponsored type stuff. So it's been a long 10 years of a lot of straight up marketing and sales type of roles that I'm now connecting the dots between this and gaming.
Well, you have all this very high level experience in a number of different companies, and that is something that I think is still lacking fairly severely in esports, is that high level experience from outside the bubble that we live in. But as you have created OMiT and you've been signing these players, did you find that there were any challenges you faced that were unique to esports that you maybe hadn't encountered previously, whether it was at Adidas, Hypebeast, or elsewhere?
Structure. I think you see all those memes and you see all those pictures of like what success looks like, right? And you see like the squiggly lines or the path that straight up looks like that, or tips of ups and downs. Within esports in general. And the thing is, this is what people don't understand, because typically you focus on one title. There are so many different formulas across all titles of how it is that you can actually succeed and make it within esports. But because you live in your bubble, and the three of us, we aren't just solely focused on Call of Duty, even though that's probably our favorite title.
Sure.
We know how it works with League of Legends, how it works with, Apex, Valorant, just within FPS. And then there's other shit like FIFA. All of those scenes are totally different. Those makeups are totally different. So there's no such thing as like structure within the esports industry that you have to follow in order to make it. It's quite literally making your own path and creating your own title. Otherwise, and now I'm talking business, I'm not talking as just strictly as a content creator, you quite literally have to carve out your own space to be relevant. And that's the difference between this and regular corporate America.
Yeah, and speaking of business too, I mean, you start talking about the business of creating an organization, an org for short, obviously, in the esports scene and the gaming scene. You guys have made some pivots more recently with some of your signings to be more content creator focused rather than just competitors. I mean, talk to me about the org scene. There's a lot of people that have zero clue how org structuring and org general business works. For instance, like we can look at 100 Thieves and a lot of things that have been going on behind the scenes and in kind of in front of the scenes with 100 Thieves with the recent layoffs, but also how they capture most of their money through their apparel sales. And then you look at somebody like FaZe and it's mostly, or like 60 something +% on sponsorships that have come in towards their players. So like talk to me a little bit about the behind the scenes from what you can on how the org works, or at least how your org works, which I think probably is different than every other org.
100%. There's no like, I bet you 100 Thieves and FaZe revenue structures and revenue numbers look totally different quarter to quarter even. Yeah. Right. Like 100%. FaZe is that org that everybody in the world knows about, but they also work with everybody in the world. There's not like quote unquote exclusivity in verticals with how it is that they do it. They have the most brand partnerships within esports in the world. How much revenue they're actually making is unbeknownst to me, and I think unbeknownst to most people, based off of like the FaZe Rain stuff that's coming out and all that jazz, right? 100 Thieves, like they're called the quote unquote hoodie orgs, but they were absolutely dominant in esports across the board last year, right? So with us, like I have deliberately not launched, and we've gotten some sick designs done for merch, and my staff begs for them, the players beg for them, but when it comes to merch and when it comes to apparel, you need to have some sort of brand affinity, right? Just because they know about you does not mean that they like you. Right. Like there's that brand affinity and there's that brand awareness play. And do I think that we would have a successful first launch collection of what apparel looks like? Sure. Do I think that the state of the game right now just removed a ton of eyeballs for what that may look like from a business sense for the casual? 100%. So what does that mean for actual revenue? What does that mean for margins? What does that mean for profit loss? All of those things are part of the business acumen that you need to be privy to before you dive into opening up an actual vertical of income. So most of what we've done, and keep in mind, we've only been around since August of last year. So, we just hit our year mark, and in order to blow up, I think that you need to be in several different titles, first of all, not just one, like what it is that we have right now. And B, you need to have a fan base that's willing to kind of just be addicted to anything and everything that you're dropping, So my revenue income right now is straight up brand partnerships. And that's because we have the impressions and the eyeballs that result in ROI for them. And that's it. That's kind of like what OMiT has at the moment before we actually dive into more.
Well, you've talked about it. You just mentioned the importance of not pigeonholing yourself into one specific game, and you said OMiT primarily. You're known for Warzone. You have, I think, the largest Warzone roster of any team. But are there other games that within 2023 onward, perhaps, that you have your eyes on most for looking to branch into that area and sign people in that game, whether Apex, Valorant, Counter-Strike, whatever it may be?
Yeah. Great question, Katie. 100%. So as of yesterday, we are talking to a top 16 Rocket League competitive team. I'm obsessed with the game of football myself, so Rocket League is one that I would have some sort of passion for. And then Apex, we're going down the route of looking at arguably the best free agency available in years worth of talent that's out there. It's just a matter of looking at the dollars, what makes sense, and who's actually going to compete in a way that is going to put OMiT on the map. So from a titles perspective, Apex and Rocket League are the two that we're eyeing for 2023.
Yeah, I was really curious. I assumed Apex was at least on your radar. I'll be curious to see where you guys go with that, if it makes sense or not, because I've heard a lot of pluses and a lot of minuses in the ALGS side of things. So
definitely.
We'll be super curious to see how that goes down. There's a lot we can talk about here, and I think that from the business side of things, games and titles and stuff like that, this is a kind of good transition point to then talk about from what you can talk about. And I don't want to, we don't need to go into the specifics of any like contracts or things like that, but there's been a lot of discussion on the timeline, and in the past, way back, kind of original OMiT, and even before that, when you were kind of signing people to Team Rafi, there's a lot of people that were critiquing the system of, hey, we're signing players. What does that actually mean? Are they receiving a salary? Is it a percentage of earnings for promotion? Like, they didn't understand kind of some of the business stuff we've already talked about today. But when you start talking about propping people up and also giving them an opportunity to grow, what does signing somebody actually look like? And then on top of that, kind of part two of that question is, what are you looking for currently in terms of people that you would want to sign in the future? Whether you have the appetite to sign anybody or not now, it doesn't change that answer. But like, what do you look for in a person when you try to sign them, and what does signing somebody even mean?
Yeah, two-prong answer. Obviously, I'll answer the former first. I don't, and I'm going to speak for my org and my org only.
Yep.
Like we saw the headlines of like XSET not paying some of their players and all that stuff. And you got to take everything with a grain of salt. There's going to be people out there that just spew things to spew things. And there's everything that you read doesn't mean that it's true. I highly doubt Super Evan has missed a payment. He's one of the biggest content creators in Warzone. He's getting paid. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you got to kind of look at the big pie. And again, I'm going to speak to what it is that I know from my books and what's coming out of my direct pocket. There's different contracts for different players. When it comes to competitive, I'd say the majority of them are on salary. But we're also focusing on not just competing. Like I don't want Sage to just go out and get champs tweets, maybe 1 out of 3 tournaments. It's about building them too, which is probably the appeal to OMiT, is how do we build you as a brand, Sage? And the only way that we do that is if people get a personality out of you. For the first year that Sage, and I'm just going to use him as an example just because I know that I can speak freely about him without him getting butthurt, but for the first year of him being on the team, he didn't turn on his camera once. Like I don't think most of the people in his stream knew what he looked like.
Yep.
I think he was making a couple TikToks. And the kid had like 8,000 followers on TikTok, and he posted once every 3 months or some shit. So like, it's kind of like, how is it that we can build a brand of these players so that they can succeed beyond just being good at the game? Why? Because there's a ton of people that are good at the game.
Yeah. You
need to kind of like also create content and build that personality so that people come to your stream and say, yo, I'm here for the rest of the stream. Yep. Those are the kind of people that you want. So how you do that, you expand, you create YouTubes, you create, the TikTok content. Obviously content right now is suffering because of the state of the game and how boring it is and how slow it is. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think it comes down to, yes, I'm a competitive player, but ultimately the big coins and what it is that I've been screaming at them for the past year and a half is you have to create content in order to do that. So, different players are on different salaries, different goals and objectives, and how is it that we're actually going to supplement them, be it paying for their editor or be it paying for just a salary and what they decide what it is that they do with said funds. That's on a case-to-case basis. Answer B, or I guess the second prong answer. What was the question again?
Who do you look for? What type of talent do you pursue? We've touched on it, but from a Obviously, there's probably a growth mentality there to some degree, like you were mentioning. But any other kind of like basic rundown of like for you in particular, because every org is different. What do you look for when you're trying to sign somebody?
Yeah. You have to either have a personality or be good at the game. Like, and when I say good, I'm talking very good at the game. Just because that's kind of like what, if you think about OMiT or you think about hashtag Rafi, even back then, it's like, okay, these kids are cracked. Don't push that. That's not a bounty I want to chase.
100%.
So like that's kind of our DNA as far as like, okay, if you're on OMiT, you're probably damn fucking good at the game. And I think you asked me what it is that I'm looking for. Like, I'm actually not looking for content creators at all right now.
Right.
Because we are the biggest already. And we're diving into a COD Challengers team that is, going to take as equal priority. So growing on the Warzone side based off the state of the game doesn't make business sense. We have the core group that we have now, and they have specific deliverables that they have to hit if they want to stay with the organization as well. So if anything, we're kind of rocking with what we got.
Yeah, and that was going to be kind of my follow-up was like, are you looking? Which I assumed you weren't, especially because you're trying to grow this talent. But, when we talk about from the behind the scenes of the business side, there's obviously a win for you all if they grow, right? Because if they grow, you can sell against them. You have more impressions.
Reciprocity.
It's exactly. Very simple. So the business from a basic rundown is seemingly, hey, we want to get people that are probably fairly small and say, but they're really, really good, and we see them having potential, and then we help them grow, and then we can sell against that in order to bring in more funds, not only for us, but also for them, right? Like, you're directly getting sponsorships for these players or these content creators. So in a general business sense, it makes sense. It is just a lot of hard work, it sounds like.
100%. Like, I'm not going out. It's a double-edged sword, and it's also, a cup of tea called reciprocity. Like, if they are signed to the organization, they're getting coached, they're getting mentored, they're getting paid, etc. They're getting tools and assets that somebody that is just getting on, playing the game, being good at it, and dipping. You sign to OMiT, and there's perks and benefits that come, obviously different sizes and shapes. And in return, someone like Adrian, who is going to get partnered probably in a week or two, that pans out. Somebody like Smith, who got partnered and left right away. Somebody like Nadia, who got partnered and left right away. That's kind of the risk you take as a business.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people realize that, like, Nadia signed when she had 5 viewers.
Yep.
Smitty signed when he had 8. You know what I mean? And both of them decided to leave, and kudos to them. I hope they grow. I hope they blow up. I don't think that there's a bigger Warzone female content creator or female content creator in general than Nadia right now.
Yeah.
For whatever reason that may be. And I have a very good relationship with her. Like, it, for good or bad reason that she blew up, we're talking about her.
Yeah.
And as an organization, you're going to pay a premium for her now. You know what I mean? So there's different ways. And then there's like the loyal type of angle where like Sage and Veiled and Adrian, like Crinks, for example, who's, playing with the Baka Bros every night. Like those guys are with me, the entire time. And they we have just different paths. There's different people that react different ways, and they're all part of the journey, and it's so far been a beautiful journey, and I wish them nothing but the best.
So I wonder, looking forward, you're talking about this aspirations to go into Rocket League, Apex, otherwise you have the largest Warzone roster, but a lot of people are talking about the fact that 2023 might be a very hard year for esports, particularly if the economy is heading toward a recession. There's been a lot of discussion on, are there going to be orgs that fail in this year due to that? A lot of them work on very slim margins as it is. So kind of a two-part question. First being, do you have an opinion on player salaries? Do you think that they're inflated right now? Do you think we're going to see an adjustment period happen with those if the economy gets a little more tight? And secondly, what plans does OMiT have to weather that storm if it does happen?
Definitely. I love your questions, Katie, by the way. These are fantastic questions. Yes, the esports industry has 100% overpaid players, in my opinion, and now we are seeing the side effects of inflation within the industry. Brands with dollars are backing out of, what this target demographic look like, and now there are, I think I saw 100 Thieves laid off 17% of their staff.
I think it was about 30
yesterday.
people, I believe.
Yeah, somewhere around that.
OMiT started because I couldn't get a job at 100 Thieves. So like, I keep an eye on what it is that these big orgs are doing. You lay off 17-18% of your staff. That is a direct correlation to brands leaving and not investing X amount of dollars. Thus, you have to reduce headcount. And I think that's the beautiful thing about OMiT is like, I have 2 or 3 people that work with me, and they're all creatives. They're all editors, they're all designers, and that's it. I handled the rest of it. So the overhead of what a small entity, I'm also not making millions of dollars like maybe some of the tier 1 organizations are, but we're doing it enough where I don't have to go back to Adidas corporate, for example. You know what I mean? So my passion is paying for my bills, and that's extremely hard to find. And I hope that esports weathers the storm, recalibrates in a way that we can bounce back even stronger when the recession is over in the general economy. But overpaying talent as well as staff, I think, is hitting us hard as an industry. And at the end of the day, esports isn't going anywhere regardless. We just need to all be ready to have lighter wallets as we move through the space.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how recession-proof, if at all, gaming in general is. I think there is an opportunity in some spaces that are maybe not as extremely, what's a good word? I guess redundant is probably the word. I think a lot of the staff that was laid off, not necessarily the staff that was laid off, but a lot of organizations that are having to lay off staff, some of those positions are probably fairly redundant. Like I know personally a lot of groups that have redundancy in their staff, which can be a good thing, especially if you've got like growth projections of like, hey, we need to have these spots already filled, that once we continue to grow and explode, like we can already cover a lot of the extra work or extra burden that comes with extra sponsors or otherwise. But what's interesting is looking at like specifically those, like how much people are getting paid, the amount of money that's coming into the space. Because Rafi, I think you and I talked about this maybe a year ago about how there was this kind of future forecasting that's been happening in the gaming scene of, hey, let's use CDL for instance, we're pricing this at $25 million to own a team in the CDL because the future looks so bright for gaming, not because the present is so bright for gaming. You know what I mean? So yeah. I'll be curious to see if recession balances that. And if some of the more non-gaming endemic brands are saying, hey, our marketing dollars, the ROI on this, we've seen it for the last 3 years, has not changed and not gotten better, not gotten what we thought it was going to be. Like we're going to start backing out of that scene a little bit.
100%. If you look at 100 Thieves, like they completely backed out of Warzone entirely. Yeah. Tommy and Rated now on the free agent market. I hope they get signed soon because they're 2 of the biggest popularity and personality wise characters definitely in the space. But they have to be looking at it like, okay, we're spending $25 million, and Nadeshot is so pissed at the league 3 weeks out of the 4 weeks. He's probably like, I'm gonna focus on other titles as well, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think it's interesting that LG is signing so many content creators within Warzone. It makes me happy to see something like that happen because they're not an organization to scoff at all. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens the first 2 quarters of this year from an esports perspective, especially and specifically the Warzone Call of Duty title. And CDL League. Let's see what happens. I'm definitely intrigued.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see if it's the non-gaming endemic brands that are backing out, or if it's everybody, including the titles, right? Like the Activision Blizzards and whoever start pulling some of their marketing budget away from events. But speaking of gaming endemic, something exciting that we have here is something that you just announced days ago, which was e-wagers. Obviously, for those that don't know at home, when there's not tournaments going on, or sometimes even when there are tournaments going on in the scene, people are constantly running wagers on the timeline, the Twitter goes bonkers, especially Warzone goes bonkers for wagers, which is essentially what I just call like a 2v2 or 1v1 tournament between two parties, just against each other. They're each putting up money for said wagers. You announced something where OMiT was working with a group called eWagers, and you've been kind of behind the scenes working with them for like over a year. So tell me a little bit about that, because that is very gaming endemic and a business that is only and surrounding this kind of world that we live in, and something that is very, very popular right now.
Yeah, I mean, wagers is what's kind of the bloodline right now on streams, on Twitch, on Facebook, whatever it may be. Like, listen, a lot of players won't get on if there's not money involved. They don't find the fun in just dropping into a public lobby and getting 30 kills and calling it a day. You got to up the stakes. How is it that we're going to make money? Shout out Twitter tournaments as well. MKIA, Sammy, as well as Winterella's, Selena. You two are the reason as to why I'm personally still on Twitch, and as to why it is a lot of competitive players are still interested in the game. Thank you so much for all the hard work that you guys put together to throw these tournaments for our players. But yeah, eWagers is basically a platform where you are wagering safely. And unfortunately, when you're surrounded by creatures in the Warzone space that think that they can bet money that they don't have, or mom and dad have cut them off because they've lost so much money and is
Surely
still
that would never happen. Surely.
Not at all. Like, how is it that I can bet $50 and then not have to pay for it after I lose, but expect to get paid 50 if I win? There's just a lot of degenerates in this space, unfortunately, that think that there's no repercussions to just getting absolutely slaughtered in a wager. But that's why it is that we were trying to find solutions for it. So eWagers, at the end of the day, is guaranteed payouts for whatever it is that you are engaging with, right? So let's say that me and GOJJ want to 1v1 in a quads lobby.
I will cast that.
I'm down.
Let me know.
I would love that. Any ciders, people in chat, I would absolutely bet on GOJJ. So there's like that. Okay, so GOJJ, you and I are in this group chat, right? There's this Warzone, 100 people, all the Aidens, all the Rateds, all the pros say, I want to find a 1v1 wager, right? You end up saying, okay, cool. Any odds? There's tons of people that are responding in between that, like, okay, cool, is this happening? And then like the chat just goes crazy as to like, okay, ciders, any odds, any kill bet, like type of dynamic. And unfortunately, there's going to be somebody that dies to a cheater and there's no admin. You end up not agreeing on what that looks like, and then that money's kind of in the air. One person thinks that they won fairly, the other person doesn't. So with eWagers, there's an admin that helps make that decision, and that money is deposited before it is that wager happens, not this after. Hey, I need to collect the 50 that I just lost to GOJJ, and that can be with 2v2s, etc., and hopefully at the end of the day also expand into tournaments, because I think that's the only way that it's actually going to do better than CMG.
Have you seen an adoption from Warzone players on this, working with eWagers? Because I know sometimes the hardest part can be just getting them to do something that might be unfamiliar, even if it will be easier for everyone in the long run.
Yeah, great question. I think that's what we're testing right now. Obviously, we just announced it. So now it's a matter of how is it that we're going to move forward with getting that adoption to happen, and how is it that we steer them away from current competitors that they complain about all the time but still use.
Yeah, and it's funny because we bring this up obviously because I wanted you to be able to talk about it. It's a awesome announcement. It's cool that you've been working on it for so long, but it also is very important to the current state of the game, which is where we're going next, because like you said, Twitter tournaments and wagers are what's keeping the game alive from a viewership perspective, because there are stakes involved. Anytime you play a game and there's no stakes involved, it's very difficult for viewers to buy in unless it's all content forward, right? So from a competitive sense, that's why people like talking about tournaments and playing in tournaments. And, you and I talked about this a while back as well, about how, like, hey, our competitors, if you will, like our pro players or competitors, whatever you want to call them, that are making money playing the game, their streams do the best when they're playing tournaments, which is why you see people like the $400,000 earner Tommy playing in a $1,000 tournament, because his stream is more popular and does better because that's his style of content. And wagers are the same thing, especially when you have people that have earned a lot of money that are throwing down $5,000 a game or something absolutely ridiculous. So definitely something that is needed. There's a lot of bad actors in the scene. It's something that our section we're going to is called Shitter's Digest, Rafi, which I think you might know. And we're going to talk about the shit that's going on the timeline. We always talk about people that are scamming and not talking or not paying after wagers or things like that. So definitely something well needed in the scene.
Yes, 100%. I love to expose and talk shit too. So, I'm owed some money, but it's not like money that's gonna, make me miss dinner.
Sure.
But I will 100% call you guys out on the timeline if by the podcast's end you haven't paid me. Let's talk.
That's amazing. Well, let's talk about the state of the game. That's where we're going. This is something we don't do often. We're moving into our Shitter's Digest section with our guest, and we're gonna kind of finish out your time here because Rafi, I'm gonna be honest. You're a troll, but you're also a big shit talker on the timeline. Well warranted shit talker a lot of the time, and so we want to shit talk a little bit about what's going on in the scene in general. And we talked about that, and I think eWagers is a perfect transition. Let's talk about the state of the game as it stands, because Warzone 2 dropped. It is very different from Warzone 1, which I think is probably a good thing in a general sense. And there are new people on top. A lot of people in your org are on top. A lot of people in what I would call quote-unquote competitive orgs with yours are on top. You're not seeing all of the same names on top of these tourneys and on top of the wagers and on top of the game right now. Let's talk about that state of the game and then also state of the tourney scene. I'll kind of open the floor for all three of us to kind of just start. But Rafi, let's start specifically with the game itself and maybe why you think some of these underrated players that you've given an opportunity to are now on top with this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a different pace. And I think the game, from what it is that they've told me, because again, you got to take my opinion with a grain of salt. I'm not out here dropping 50 balls myself, right? So at the end of the day, you have to look at it from a sense of why is it that this game is different than Caldera, and why is Caldera different than Verdansk, and why is it that you can't really compare them apples to apples? The game is a lot slower. The pace is a lot slower. I think positioning is way more important when trying to win a breakdown. You know, these guys basically split and then have to go out and solo quad a bunch of 40-year-old dads sitting in corners, which is what the game wants it to be because of the way that it's structured. TTK is absolute dog shit. I wish one day that they were able to update that. There's no reason as to why people die in 2 bullets. And, you know, I think it's the pacing, the TTK, and how is it that you're going to adapt to that? The skill gap, just quite frankly, I just don't think that it's there. You know, Base God Xenon, who's on my team, told me I sounded really dumb when I said this, but I still believe it, and it's my opinion. I think that there are probably 20, 25 players on this map, and then there's everybody else. From competition standpoint, from a skill set standpoint, I firmly stand on that, and the results kind of speak for that. Thankfully, 7 of the top 10, in my opinion, are on OMiT.
Yeah.
That's just what I believe. And of course, that's going to have a taste of bias, but again, the Twitter tourneys, which is everything that we have right now, we don't have anything else. They're winning that. So,
I mean, speaking of bias, and this is actually a question from chat that I would love to hear your thoughts on as well, is do you have an opinion on all of the top 32 tournaments we've been seeing recently? Because bias, people say favoritism. There's a lot of scuffles and dust-ups that have occurred over these top 32s. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, especially since you just said you think there's 20, which is leaving a decent amount of that 32 as everyone else.
Yeah, like there's a huge skill difference between the Hisokas, Adrians, Sages, and Veileds down to like the, you know, clouded 30 to 32 players, even though they're top 32 is kind of what I'm saying. So I actually am just going to read a tweet that I sent out in my troll days about these top 32s. And I don't know if you missed it or not, Katie. But I saw a tweet from somebody about a top 32 tournament that now Boom is picking up. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, because that's what people do to gain followers now, is just pretend to throw tournaments and then they don't happen.
Sure.
Quite literally, let's see if I can scroll down and find this fast enough for you. But I think I said something along the lines of, Sammy and I are going to throw, here we go, January 6th. Yo, Mrs. Know-It-All are going to host a real top 32. Second day in a row, I wake up and squint at the list because I think I'm having an actual stroke. Hashtag no clout, hashtag no ego, hashtag good vibes. That kind of encompasses like what I think about these top 32s. Is like it's your boys, it's your friends, it's clout, it's views. I compiled a top 32 with Scummin and Rated. They kind of laughed at me for having 3 or 4 names in there. And I think it's, at the end of the day, there's opinions and there's bias amongst everything. But if you look at it and you look at top earners lists, do I think that Warzy is now a top 32 player? No, but he has insane earnings because he picked up the game faster, right?
Yep.
So he made bread based off of what that was at the beginning, right? So you have to give him his kudos for that. The game just is kind of progressing and people are picking it up at different paces. But you kind of have to respect the competitors' opinions as well, because they're the ones that are quite literally playing those players, right? So Sammy and I may have an opinion, and then we kind of course correct it with people that face these players all the time. I think top 10 is, for the most part, like there's just no way that you're going to convince other people that, top 5 even is different than what it is that most people think they are.
Yeah.
That's tough. When you get into those levels, top 10, top 5, if you're doing overall, that's hard. I think it becomes a little easier if you designate that to Al-Mazrah, Caldera, or Verdansk and have those debates. I think
100%.
But yeah, if you're doing in general, that's really hard.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I mean, you guys know, I used to do the old tier list action on the timeline and would get cooked for it, and it was a lot of fun until it started getting real nasty. And so I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't do this as much. But
we gotta do it again,
ultimately, here's the opinion on this, and then we'll kind of talk about the state of the competitive scene in general. But the think about the bias and about the tier list and about the top 32. It's like, if they want to run the tournament, it sucks, it's dumb, it's whatever, but like, do your thing and like crank it out. And if you want to try to gain views from it, fantastic. I have no problem with that. And if you're getting butthurt about it, just prove them wrong. That's always been my opinion since the beginning. But no, I agree. It is very, very clear that there are some people that know how to play this game well and some people that do not. And by this game, I mean this new map in Warzone 2, because we'll use some of your players for an example. Like Sage has really made a name for himself in this game. He was very good in the other games. I remember that, I think it was CDLR or the Rebirth tournament or something. I interviewed him after the fact, and he was like, yeah, I don't know how I won this. I haven't played the game in like 3 months. I don't know. I just won. But that's a very different Sage than we're seeing right now, which is somebody that is grinding every day and playing a ton. And there's a difference in his play style now and the grind that he's got right now from the content side as well as the competitive side. So I'm excited to see new names on top. And going back to the ego thing and
Triple A, man.
Going back to the ego thing, this is the thing. It's like, hey, at some point, people with the ego and the clout, especially if the game continues to flourish, they're going to be losing a lot of that ego and clout as their views drop by a third or a fourth or a seventh or a 10th if they're a competitor only. And these other people, like the Sages that are growing dramatically, are going to be taking that viewership because people that follow competitors are following them, yes, for personality, but also, hey, this person is the best. I want to learn from them.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing is there's good players and then there's great players, like, for example, Aiden. Like, Aiden's a perfect example to Katie's point of like, Aiden to me is the best Call of Duty player as of recent, but he's a totally different player on this map. And I think it stems from him just not enjoying the game. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like,
that's huge.
If you don't like the game and you're not putting in the hours that Unveiled, Hisoka, Shifty, Sage, Adrian, Lennon, FIFA, Scummin, like those names that are in on stream gaming every single day that specific title, because right now I think Aiden and Smith are playing more Caldera than they are, the actual title. Like, it comes from those guys are grinding. They know jump spots, they know the map, they know the rotations just so much more than somebody that might not, that was unbelievably talented and is continuously talented now. Is that there's just like a different level to that dedication when it comes to succeeding on this title.
I think there's two notes to that too, of like, I really am excited about customs. I think
Yes.
On this map in particular,
Me too, bro.
like, I mean, and I don't have any insider intel. I have a feeling it's not. I know it's gonna come at some point, but I don't know when. And I would assume it's probably like the summer. Like, I don't think it's soon, to be frank.
Really?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's soon. I think it's just. We would have heard something if it was soon. I think there's no way it's inside the next 3 to 4 months. I think it's at least Q2, which sucks. I don't know anything. Let's be clear. I'm speaking from the kind of top of my head, but that's my opinion. However, I think customs on this map, it will play slow, it will play ratty, but it will make for some incredible events, and it'll make for some incredible viewership moments, especially from a main broadcast standpoint, that we've never seen in Warzone history, period. Especially because there's the intel, or what we assume will come with it, which is some sort of a caster or a theater mode. Again, that's not confirmed either. But if that happens, dude, customs on this map, the broadcast, oh my gosh. I lose my mind.
To be honest, like, I think customs comes out by March.
Really?
I hope.
Yeah.
Because if it's anything past March, you're dead. You're dead in the water. Like, even competitive wise,
It is time sensitive,
it's
to be sure.
so boring already. Like, the 2v2s is so boring by now.
Yeah.
And people, like, any single comp player will tell you, like, they'll give their right arm for customs. And I hope that it's by springtime, because if it's past that, I really believe that it's too late.
Well, again, I think it really depends too, and we can't know this, unfortunately, but the appetite Activision has for any sort of competitive realm in Warzone in general. And I think consistently through the lifespan of the game, they haven't really put a lot of focus on that, because they've kind of made it clear that that's not what they're interested in. I don't know if that mindset is going to change in Al Mazrah. Obviously, I haven't heard anything, but hopefully, Rafi, I agree with you. Hopefully it comes out sooner rather than later, because 2v2s are fine, but when all you have are 2v2s, it gets extremely stale. And when people might not necessarily like the game and the map and the playstyle already, adding that as another pain point for them in the competitive realm might mean that you see more people going to play other games, or taking a back seat and having competitive Warzone content be their secondary as opposed to their primary.
Yeah, I agree. Who do you have as the custom demon teams? Because it's going to be trios. I doubt it's quads.
Yeah. Well,
That's
Katie, you can answer that if you want. I mean, I think some of the similar trios that we saw at the end of Caldera, the very end of Caldera, will probably make an appearance again. But I'm looking at some of the OMiT trios that are coming out, right? Like, I mean, I want to see freaking Mayapo and Otter absolutely obliterate some people going into customs in this map. That's all
different in customs.
That's all I'm saying, dude.
Yeah.
I would love to see who was Hisoka's trio. Why am I not?
Skullface,
Yes,
and
Skullface.
Mayapo.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I would love to see whatever that trio ends up being. I personally consider Hisoka to be my best player in the game right now. They are so consistently dominant. And the interesting thing in this, I think, is that the names, Rafi, that come to mind for me first for dominant trios in customs are a lot of the new players. It's not a lot of the old guard players. Like, to be frank, I wouldn't put TBE as one of my top trios anymore. I wouldn't necessarily put maybe an Aiden Z Smith and Extra as one of my top threes, because through the end of Caldera and the beginning of Al Mazrah, it's been a lot of that new lifeblood and those up and comers that have been stealing the show. They are the ones who figured out the meta first. We're grinding the hardest. We're figuring out the change in playstyle from Caldera to Al Mazrah, and you see it in their earnings. So I think we're really going to continue, at least for the time, to see dominance from some of the new players that are making a name for themselves.
I agree. I mean, you think of like Scummin, who doesn't play with Unrational anymore, right? Like they don't duo up anymore. What could they do as a trio? Who does he pick up as his other two? I think
Huskers and Noobs split up in trios and stuff like that. Exactly to your point.
Well, okay.
So like that kind, it's going to be like a musical chair, and it's going to be interesting because you can't really practice right now, right? But from a makeup perspective, if Sage doesn't team up with Biffle,
I was about to go there. Who is their third? Who do they pick if it's Biffle and Sage? If they do go there for customs, who do they pick up as their third in that comp?
I mean, do you leave Biffle comfortable with Super Evan, or do you go out and pick somebody else up? Do you pick up Sagen and Veiled if you're Biffle?
I'll be.
Or does like by then Adrian is going to be 18. He's going to have to be invited to some of these if these guys are getting invites.
Yeah.
You unleash Adrian. Who does Adrian go to?
Right.
Like that's why I said AAA, Angel, and Adrian would be an insane team.
Yep.
You got those rotations unlocked. Hisoka, Shifty, and a third. Is that Skullface?
Right.
Yeah, that's
to give them the respect that they deserve. Like
that's where I was going.
Demon teams.
I think Hisoka, Shifty, Skullface would be a trio that I would love to see going into this one, especially with Shifty kind of not remaking his name, but just kind of everybody saying, "Okay, fine, yeah, our bad." You know what I mean? Because that's what it is. The kid's unreal on this map and has been playing fantastic, and he and Hisoka in general together have been playing fantastic. Adding in Skullface, who I personally think is one of my favorite customs players to watch.
100%. Skullface is insane in customs.
That trio would be dynamic. But to your point, I think we're going to see a lot of kind of breaking aparts of teams that used to exist that no longer exist on this map. People are going to look for the easiest way to cash, which is going to be some of these less known players. And it is going to be a mad dash to find the secret strats in customs and also the secret strats to what team works and how do we actually put in hours together. It's going to be
Skullface is going to bring out that whiteboard. We talked to him on bot lobby once upon a time, Rafi, and he said they had a whole whiteboard for customs. They were writing down strats where everyone else likes to go. So look, I agree. Skullface, especially in customs, really fun player to watch. But I think that goes again to the concept of the dedication difference that you're seeing in some of the up and comers.
Well, Rafi,
AAASSS. I think those are my two favorite teams.
I'm there too. And going back all the way to your mission too at the beginning, and I think this is probably a good place to end is and open up the floor for anything else you want to talk about before we close. But is I personally believe, and I've believed this for a long time, it's why I've been crying for customs, that when customs comes and Activision Blizzard and other orgs and other sponsors ultimately throw money back into the game for events to promote it, it is the perfect and most golden ticket opportunity for those that are really, really good at the game to make a name for themselves in less than a month's time. It is the next big, hey, this is my opportunity. It's not luck. There's got to be an opportunity that I then capture and I execute on. Sage is the perfect example. He was given an opportunity by a big name to play well, and he did, and has capitalized on that and grown. There is going to be a lot of opportunities for a lot of players that are obviously in your org and other orgs or not on an org that are really, really good. They get that one opportunity. If you can execute on it as customs come out, you will be the biggest hot commodity, literally supply and demand for you, because people want money and people want to win money, and there's going to be a lot of it when customs drops.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think people don't realize that more people watch customs, and you have to take advantage of that opportunity because they don't come often. I've seen it happen. A really talented player, insane at 2v2, and I won't say names, and then they get that opportunity from a big content creator, and they absolutely blow it.
Yep.
Views
100%.
were high during the stream, but then after that is that you're back to just back to a 2v2 demon. Like, you got to take advantage of those opportunities for sure.
I think sometimes customs can also, in their own way, not necessarily expose, but showcase the players who, you might be really, really good at running around a map and killing billies with like a 1.0 KD, but if you're playing against Sage in a custom and you just can't get anything going, it does kind of show you what players are able to play against the best and what players only really thrive in a mismatched scenario, like in a kill race.
Yeah, it's two different skill sets too. Like, I really do believe that they're different. Now, think about this, Gojj and Katie, and I know we're kind of at time, but imagine customs and they don't tweak the lack of money that there is on the map
Ooh,
and the regain that you have to go through as a player after you get gunned, it turns into, is it going to be a camp fest? Do you have to like figure out like money rotations before you do anything? Are we waiting for loadout? Like customs just excites me so much as a viewer, as a spectator, because it really is best versus best. But that aspect of it, of lack of money and having to know rotations as to where to regain and where you land on money, is going to be vital.
I 100% agree. I will be very, very curious to see, with the game where it's at, if there's been any tweaks whenever customs comes out, money, loot, regain potential. When we get to customs, will it feel like ALGS or will it feel like Warzone? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, will it feel like we hold, we get to the zone, and then it's just an all-out brawl at the very end? Or is it going to feel more like Warzone where there's consistent action? And I think the key to success for customs is not necessarily that it goes either direction. I think the key to success for customs and running events is going to come down to, are they actually going to release a caster mode? Because if it goes ALGS style and we don't have a caster mode, customs tournaments are going to suck from a viewer perspective, and they're not going to enjoy it. If it comes out with a caster mode, we can tell a very holistic and amazing story about the game with no one fighting for 20 minutes. Like, that is a thing we can do. But that has been the major complaint of viewers. It has been that customs are slow, and they're only going to be slower. So we got to have some sort of a buy-in, right, from the behind the scenes. We'll see. I don't know. I'm pumped about it though. I'm super pumped.
Me too.
Well, Rafi, this has been a pleasure, man. I want to open up the floor for final comments. Anything we did not talk about that you really want to talk about, from OMiT to state of the game to players on your team to the future of the game, the future of some of your players. Anything that we didn't touch that you'd love to touch before we close?
Yeah. There are women in this game that are better than most of the guys that you guys choose and root for. That's kind of like what I do want to say is the Smixies, the Sellies. I would choose them over some of these misogynistic incels that walk around acting like they're better than all the women. Seeing a lot of takes about top 32s and why is it that some are in or some aren't. But I just wanted to say that because I'll continue to stay true to giving a platform and a voice to the ones that may not get that opportunity. So more co-ed Twitter tournaments, I hope, that are coming in. I know we're throwing one. We're not going to call it top 16, even though it's my top 16. And hopefully we see more action of how it is that the ladies can continue to showcase their skill in this game.
Well, Rafi, thank you so much. It means a lot to hear you say that. I know there's been a ton of support from OMiT folks and otherwise in chat. It is always wonderful when we get someone willing to speak candidly and honestly with us on the podcast. So really, thank you very much for taking the time. I think there's been a lot of great insights, and I personally hadn't heard about your history. So that was really awesome to kind of see the come up in the scene and how everything happened.
And shout out to you guys for giving Sage and Xenon an opportunity to play on LAN. Thank you guys for that.
The best. You know, Sage told me he didn't even have audio in his headset while he was playing.
He didn't.
He was like, can't hear anything, don't know what's going on, let me still win.
Yeah, we tried to fix that so many times before it got started. Unfortunately, he showed up, I think, 15 minutes before we were supposed to start. But that's neither here nor there. He killed it, and they played fantastic, and we had a blast with them. So yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that, but it was our pleasure for sure.
Oh. Well, thank you guys. And thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great star. Somebody we've been wanting to have on the podcast forever. Those of you that are in the channel, thank you for supporting him and supporting OMiT, but also supporting us with having him on. I've known Rafi for a very, very long time. Like literally since I got started in the scene. I was one of the first people that was running Twitter tournaments, funny enough, kind of back in the day, which is really odd to say out loud. But he was kind of one of the others. It was kind of us two and a few others at the very, very beginning of Verdansk that were running a lot of those kind of Twitter tournaments, $500 to all the way up to the $13,000 Rebirth tournament that I ran. So it's cool to have that long history together, be able to tell that story, and also talk more about the future with him and what he's been able to do. And I loved, Katie, specifically the mission of OMiT and why that name is so powerful, to be frank, right? It is about
something that you might
people.
see it,
Yeah.
but once you think about it, or Rafi, for example, explains it, you're like, oh, that is very meaningful on a lot of different layers that aren't surface level. So I enjoyed that because again, that was something I hadn't really thought about until he explained it. And I was like, oh, duh, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. But no, I think fantastic, a lot of interesting information, but we're not done yet because we teased into Shitter's Digest a little bit with Rafi, but we've still got a decent amount of things to get through. A lot of them focus kind of on the current state of the game and what's been going on with new and old competitors.
Yeah, I want to talk about it. I think we've got a good 10-15 minutes here that we can kind of crank through some of this stuff because we haven't done a podcast in a while, Katie, right? So there's a lot that's happened.
I missed you.
So I missed you as well. We took a lot of time.
I tried to hit him up, Chad. I was like, do you want to do a podcast? And he was like, he just left me on red every time.
That's
and I didn't know what was going
not true.
on.
I was traveling a lot. We made some great short content, but we're here. We're really excited about what we're doing with Bot Lobby, especially going into 2023. So stay tuned for that. But to finish out the Shitter's Digest section here, Katie, there's been a lot of stuff. We talked about some of the kind of players that have stood up. I mean, you guys know this. I created Warzone earnings with a good friend of mine, Del Tara, who's the lead coder for AMD or something. Dude doesn't have time, and yet he still made time for this project because it's a passion project for both of us. And I've been keeping track of all of the earnings. Now, the last time we updated it was December 21st. Since then, no major tournament has happened, but there have been a lot of Twitter tournaments, so some of these numbers will change. But speaking of that, the game came out, October? Is that November? I don't even remember. I think it's October, late October or whatever when the game came out. In the first
November 16th.
Thank you. Okay, even better. In the first month and 5 days, Hisoka has earned $40,000. This is from December 21st to November 16th. $40,000 in a month playing this game. So that's how many big tournaments happened, and then also how much that guy is winning at the very beginning. Right beneath that, 4 and Jace, $31,000. December 21st, November 16th. In that span of time, a month and 5 days, 4 and Jace has earned $31,000. Shifty, $23,000. FIFA Kill, $18,000. Wars, $17,500. Only in one event, though, right? It's crazy the amount of money they threw into it early, how much money some of these players are winning. Hisoka has earned 12 podium finishes in that first month going into this title, with Shifty at 11. Hisoka just having some podium finishes in some larger events, being at the top at 40K. You don't see in this list pretty much any of the big names, aside from you see Tommy at number 8 overall, which he will be out of the top 10 because of Twitter tournaments when we update it again very shortly. You see
the biggest in that is FIFA.
Yeah,
of the top 10 currently.
FIFA is currently in the top 10. He will continue to be in the top 10 once we update it again. But Hate Adrian, the guy that Rafi was talking about, he's currently at 9th, and he's won a lot more since I updated this, especially Twitter tournaments. So there's just going to be a lot of new names that are going to be taking over this game, especially if Activision comes back and continues to fund large prize pool events. I don't think you see a lot of our big names that have been big names in the past be big names in the tournament scene, and they're going to have to position and reposition their content.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, right, when you take a look at Hisoka, now there haven't been any major tournaments after the last 2 eFuse 25Ks. And so I'm going to exclude kind of some of the Twitter tournaments that have been happening. But Hisoka specifically, he's won his last 4 major tournaments, or rather 3 for the major ones in a row, right? He won the TSC 100K, eFuse 25K, eFuse 25K. He's been so dominant. But Shifty and 4 and Jace as well, as it bears out in the earnings, just incredibly dominant. And there's, I think, a lot of, I don't know, do we want to get into the topic of kind of the rise of the new and what's going on with some of the older, or do we want to wait?
I think we can talk about that briefly and just say, there's the two-pronged answer to that is A, it's a different game and you got to learn it, and some people aren't willing to adjust as fast. But B, I think there is definitely like Rafi mentioned this with Aiden, a lack of motivation to get good at this game, albeit there's a big bag out there that in theory we're all going to be chasing coming into 2023 when Activision and larger companies, boom, eFuse, etc., that gets funded. Those events start happening again. There is a bag to chase there. If you don't enjoy the game, it is so hard to grind and be motivated to get better. And I think that is the major issue with a lot of our formerly biggest name players in the game.
Yeah, and I think that is something that plagues a lot of the older pro players, whether it was CWL, CDL. I've never ever agreed with the take of, oh, you're 26, you're just aging out because you're older and you're slower. No, you're
Yeah.
not. That's not. You're 26.
I'm
Like
ancient, I
it is
guess.
a life change. It is just simply in mentality wise, growing older, you have a lot more things to think about and maybe wants in life than an 18-year-old does. Motivation is a massive part of that. If that game is changing yearly, some people, especially if you don't like the game, it is so hard to force yourself to play it for 8 to 10 hours a day, every day for months and months and months.
Yep.
And I agree. I think you're seeing that with some of these players. But interestingly enough, kind of on that point, right, is maybe one of the people that you look at the most for something in that regard is that I think maybe 2 weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, Tommy announced free agency with CDL. And it was very interesting to see that because TBE, or the Tommy and Almond duo in Caldera, toward the latter portion of it, weren't winning quite as much. There was a lot of podium finishes, but they weren't quite getting on top. And in Al Mazrah, we've kind of seen that same thing happening again. And it could be that is maybe pushing him in the direction of announcing free agency. Could be motivation, as you said, could be really not enjoying Al Mazrah, maybe looking at the landscape of it in the long term and thinking and maybe making that bet that it's going to be better to try and get back into pro play. Now, I don't think there's necessarily going to be a ton that comes from that, because it's very hard for retired pros this many years out to make a comeback into pro play unless they want to go into challengers. But I'm curious, since we saw Tommy do that, do you think we might see other retired pros in the Warzone scene trying to do that as well? Because if you take a look at it, in the top 100 earners, GOJJ on Warzone earnings, only 6 of them out of the top 100 are current or retired pros. And Scump's only in there because he won that 100K.
Yeah.
So you take that anomaly out, and the only current pro you have in there is Methods with about 30K. And then it's Tommy, Rated, Blast, and Slacked. That is a incredibly small portion of that top 100 for Warzone.
Yeah, I think that it comes down to what they enjoy to do, and I even heard Tommy talking about this. And to be clear, Tommy isn't washed or anything. Dude got second in the World Cup. I mean, he played fantastic. You're not seeing the name that was at the top all year, literally all year. Caldera was out until the very, very final moments because of World Series of Warzone 100K solo YOLOs. Is OMiT. OMiT has $300 earned in this game, not including maybe some Twitter tournaments that are not in here yet. Isn't competing at either the level, or isn't competing in general. Let's be clear about it, right? Tommy's top 10. He got second in that World Cup. But yeah, you're right. I think it comes down to, what do you enjoy doing? It is so hard to be motivated to play this game, and a lot of those former pros are saying, "Man, I miss the league. I miss the structure. I miss not wondering or worrying about when's the next tournament going to be," right? So it's yeah, I think there maybe could announce some free agency. I don't think there's any world where any of them get picked up unless they try to grind challengers. And it would
be incredibly difficult.
And I ultimately don't think any of them will grind challengers. I know Blast was kind of talking for a while, a couple weeks ago, about wanting to go through challengers again and grind. I don't think they'll ever execute on that, because it's much, much easier to turn on your stream to a couple hundred viewers, make decent sub money and play tournaments every once in a while. So it's it's just going to be a matter of adapting, overcoming if you want to, or completely pivoting and changing your content. I think a great example of that, somebody like Nadia, still plays Call of Duty, but has completely pivoted their content away from competing. If you guys remember, Nadia used to be one of the main female competitors in the game. It was Z-Laner's co-ed duo for a long time. They weren't necessarily winning everything, but certainly was competitive, right? So it was completely shifting away because of something that you either don't enjoy, or because of some luck or things that you've created have come your way to blow up and have some success. You need to pivot and you need to adapt. That is the entirety of this scene. If you are not able to adapt and you're stuck in your ways, and to be frank, I'm not calling anybody out in particular, but if you're going back to play Caldera because I'm better on this game, that's not, if you're looking not just to have fun, but if you're looking to succeed as a competitor or a content creator, that's not how you do it. You gotta adapt to this title, whether you like it or not, or go to a different title and adapt by doing something else. I don't think there's any market for old Warzone content or old Warzone tourneys besides a one-off throwback in Caldera at some point. So, that's my take on it, is figure it out. If this is your job, you're gonna have to figure it out. And in any other job, when the market changes, you got to figure it out. It doesn't change just because we're in gaming.
No, I agree. And I think something to keep in mind as well, as Chief is just shoving my blankets on my bed, thank you, Kat, is that 99% of people in the world who have a job don't really like their job, but they do it because it gets them paid. And more often than not, they're good at it. We are in a very privileged realm that our job and a lot of these players' jobs are to sit at home and stream to people and play a video game. And I think sometimes there's a bit of a kind of a gap there in understanding that a job's still a job and it's not always going to be fun. So are you the person who has the mentality to push through that, look at it as a challenge, look at it as simply something you have to do to learn that new map, to learn the play styles, to go watch the VODs of Sage or Hisoka or whoever, of Adrian, who are doing really well on this map and get better? Or do you just sit back and chalk it and say, I'm going to go play Caldera? I think that's kind of a big part of it too, is who has the kind of the right mental to be able to do something like stream when it's fun and also do it when it just feels like a job.
Yep, 100%. And if you can't do that and you can't change your mentality about that, figure something else out and adapt. That's the way the world works, and it is frustrating, I know, because I've been there. But I'm sure you can find something to do because you've made some success, at least at this point, right, in the previous title. So I think
there was actually something, Gojj, really quickly. I threw it in, so I don't know if you want to talk about it, but really quick, I saw this Huskers tweet, because Huskers has been tweeting pretty vocally about disadvantages for mouse and keyboard in Al Mazrah and in this new play style. And he recently tweeted, I put it in the doc, but something of interest that he tweeted January 5th. So 5-6 days ago. Do I force myself to switch to controller and become a better player because of how broken auto aim is? Or do I stay on mouse and keyboard to keep my pride and prevent losing a group of viewers that enjoy watching mouse and keyboard? The question that's always floating in my head. And that's a big thing to see, because you don't really hear Huskers talk about it as much. And then Al Mazrah, it's a very consistent theme with him, with Huskers and Breadman being our top two most prominent mouse and keyboard players. Do you think you actually see a switch from Huskers to try and learn controller?
I think it's going to take a couple big losses in tournaments to have him actually switch, especially because his platform's almost been entirely built around that. But I saw somebody in chat say it earlier, and I've totally seen it on the timeline. Mouse and keyboard on this title is seemingly almost nearly chalked. I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult. Sure. I will be curious to see if there's any advantage to it, maybe in customs, where you're taking some hyper long fights, especially with the TTK as fast as it is. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a real opportunity. I mean, let's all remind ourselves, like, Huskers' beginnings were console controller player, and he was a freak. So it's not like it's going to be that difficult, but it is a whole brand shift that I think could be not detrimental, but pretty difficult to actually pull off. So I don't know. I'm excited. Again, customs is what I'm really looking forward to. Customs is something that I'm excited about. It's something that I've loved since the very beginning, because it feels more, instead of being a charismatic host doing a 2v2 tournament where we get to talk, it is actually commentary, and feels more traditionally like some sort of a Warzone league or a pro scene. So really excited about that. But Katie, we pull those stories kind of from our brains, right? We've cast so much Warzone that when we do customs, like, you can sit there and be like, I remember this, but there's so much information that we just don't have available to us because we don't have that caster mode, that I completely agree with you on that sentiment. Not only as a better viewing experience and a way to make the main broadcast more appetizing to people who might just be sticking to a specific player's stream, but also I think for us, we always want to do as good of a job as we can. And we know without that right now, we kind of have that hard ceiling in our ability to provide the best experience. Yeah, no, totally agree. Well, we've covered a lot today. We've talked about Shitter's Digest. I know there's a lot more we can talk about. Excited about future tournaments. You know, we've had an announcement about a potential $250,000 tournament in Dubai that you and I have known about for a long time. But
Quarter Mutineers teased out a potential 100K land in March.
I think there's a lot more coming from the Activision Blizzard side, hopefully. So we'll see what gets funded and what doesn't, and how the tournament scene shakes out. But we're excited to be here. Bot Lobby Podcast will be covering it all. We love talking about the comp scene in Warzone, or maybe lack thereof sometimes, but something that you and I are super passionate about, something that I built my entire kind of brand around at the very beginning and built up to where I am now. So always going to be passionate about it, even if I'm branching out into a bunch of variety content. So Katie, it is good to be back. And this was a great episode. We can go ahead and close that out here. Shout yourself out, where people can find you, anything you're working on, and then we'll close it out.
Yeah, I've got some fun stuff. Can't talk about it, but got some fun stuff happening out in Vegas at the end of the month. I'll be going live on my own stream, twitch.tv/Katie Bedford. Right after this, we're going to be playing the Halo Infinite campaign. I'm pretty excited. But
nice.
other than that, just kind of hitting the ground running in January. Got some fun stuff, but unfortunately, I can't really talk about most of it. But you and I actually have a broadcast tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific. So make sure to look out for announcement tweets about that.
Doing a little intel work tomorrow. We love intel around these parts. Yeah, I'm GrandmasterGojj. It's been a blast having you on the podcast. This is obviously my channel, twitch.tv/GrandmasterGojj. I basically only stream for the podcast, though. So if you want to see more content up from me or from us, this is the podcast for you. Go check us out on YouTube. Scroll through all of our former content, making short form content, and more to come on that side. But until next time, folks, we've had a blast here on the podcast, and looking forward to next week's. We got some fun guests coming up. We'll see you guys later. Peace.